Should I submit a collaborative, joint, or individual grant application? This is a question that we should be asking strategically on every single grant opportunity that we come across. So, choosing between collaborative, joint, and individual grant applications can be a tough decision, but it is typically reserved for organizations who have relationships, who have budding partnerships, collaborations already moving forward. And we're going to talk through that today. I'm Benjamin Dean from grantgetting.com. I hope you enjoy this video and others like it on the channel, which are aimed at helping you get more grants. So this video, we're going to break down all three, or the three segments that I've sort of put together. Collaborative and joint are in some ways, very similar, an umbrella of each other, but I think it's important to sort of look at things a little bit differently. So we're going to start with what I'm calling a collaborative grant application. Collaborative grants are grants where you have, let's say, more than two or three or more applicants coming together. In some definitions I've seen, it's four or more. Doesn't really matter. The premise is the same here, but it's multiple organizations who are coming together on a project, program, or initiative where each of these partners or contributors do contribute unique skills, unique resources, expertise for the projects. These grant applications and the project plans within them typically divide the responsibility and funding across multiple organizations or all organizations. If you're working on a bigger project involving multiple stakeholders, collaborative grants could be a great fit. However, successful collaboration requires strong communication and clearly defined roles, among many, many other things. So, some other points on collaborative grants. So, why would one consider a collaborative grant? Someone like yourself might consider a collaborative grant where you're looking at perhaps taking the lead in rounding up multiple organizations to put forth a project in terms of an application for a grant. You would look at doing this perhaps because the need in your community dictates it. So there's a problem in your community or an opportunity to solve a problem in your community where you can't do it alone. And it so happens there's a grant opportunity to solve that specific problem. Okay, so that sort of thinking is, of course, applicable to both joint and collaborative, that you need somebody beside yourself. Then it becomes a decision, well, who do we need and how many players do we need and how do we structure this? A joint application is similar, but it's different in that we're just going to talk about it as you and another partner, and you're equal partners for the most part in this. Collaborative grant are the most complex. The things to think about in terms of why to look at a collaborative is you are pooling not only your resources when it comes to the project plan, but when it comes to the grant application, you're also pooling your impact data. Okay, so in some cases, particularly in, let's say, rural communities or organizations that come together that all focus on a particular underserved aspect of a community. Again, it could be animals, it could be environment, it could be people, could be economic, could be anything. But there's an aspect of pooling together the not only resources, skills, and expertise, but also history, data, in terms of what has been accomplished. So as to say, collaborative grants, you're typically looking at larger scale dollars to make this worthwhile for everybody. So let's say it's 6-digit and above, $100,000 and above. Typically, some of these federal grants will be more than that, depending on your area. But let's say you're looking at, $100,000 split between 5 organizations. Does not need to be equal. That can be decided in terms of, who's doing what the responsibilities are, and what the actual budget is to accomplish those things. But for the sake of argument, let's say it's equal. It's $20,000 a piece, 5 players in this grant, all contributing equal budgetary items to accomplish a goal. You would want to consider this if you're looking at a grant opportunity, that it would be very unlikely for you to be able to compete for yourself, or very unlikely for anyone in your community, even better, to compete for by yourself. This is the opportunity, in my opinion, is to look at grants that are potentially more competitive, or that require certain aspects of their program to be touching different elements of the community, or to be having different expertise in place, such as representation from underserved communities, or a wonderful history, a very sound history of program evaluation. Two things that maybe your organization doesn't have, but what resources you do have fit as a piece of the puzzle. Okay, so collaborative grant opportunities, that's one, is that, it's an opportunity that otherwise you would not compete for. I guess two would be an opportunity that by coming together, you would strengthen an application, you would be more likely to get it. And then looking at it again as three, this is a real need in the community. Okay, so you're starting with the need. You're not starting with the grant opportunity, and you're saying this is something that you've been working on in your community. Let's take a big issue like homelessness. Is there one organization that's going to solve homelessness all by itself? Unlikely, right? In terms of using that broad term of solving homelessness, solving a problem, which I don't like, but I think you understand what I mean. That's a big thing to tackle for any one organization. And let's say there's 10 different organizations that have all been doing things from a different point of view to attempt to solve this, or to enhance the environment as it relates to the affordability of homes and education and everything that goes along with that topic. Then you're going to say, well, we don't have the resources to continue to fight this battle independently. Let's come together and let's submit some collaborative grant opportunities as a coalition, as a network, as a group that is coming together with specific objectives. Okay, so the other thing to consider with collaborative grants is it is preferable, in my experience, that your organization already has some degree of a working relationship with another organization before you enter into this short-term marriage, fiscal marriage, together. Because depending how it's structured, for the most part, every organization is going to be reliant upon every other organization for, of course, actually doing the things that are articulated in terms of the activities, but also the reporting. Okay, reporting mechanisms need to be put together. So I'll have other videos on this channel that go deeper into collaborative grants, but those are the main things to sort of think about as you're strategizing. So that's collaborative. Within sort of the umbrella of non-individual, there's also joint. So a joint application, number two, are designed for project where you've got, say, two organizations, yourself, your organization, and one other organization. That is by far the most common joint application. Okay, and it's going to have centralized funding. In this type of grant, the responsibilities are going to be generally equally shared, requiring transparent decision making between the two entities. If you're looking to strengthen a partnership that you have already started, or you're looking to enhance a program that you have with another program from another organization and sort of do it together, joint communications, joint planning, joint expense sharing, where you see this opportunity for efficiency to either do something new or do something complementary to what you already do, then this might be a good option. Okay. This is something, again, we can go more into in other videos, but specific for this video, a point will be that with this type of grant, the budget has to be super clear. Who is going to be the lead organization? If that is a requirement, most will require that there's one lead organization and one sub-awardee, depending on the terminology. I have seen instances where joint applications are done really, really well, like really well. Project plans are super sound and decision makers are identified. But there's this aspect of when you're writing a grant, let's say a joint application comes in and you're part of this dual organization team that's coming in and asking for $50,000. Well, in most applications, there isn't the what if scenario baked into the application. So as to say, what if instead of $50,000 you only receive 30? What can you do with $30,000? Right? Because that's most of the time, much of the time, that's how, some of the smaller, more regional grants, that's how it works. There's going to be a prorated sort of decision-making process. So if it's not baked in there, which most of the time it's not, that's something you have to be thinking about with a joint application because it affects your variables and it affects that organization's variables. So there might be certain fixed costs that are now unattainable to purchase because you needed a certain threshold, right? We could think about those as fixed costs, right? So let's say there's a $50,000 budget and $35,000 of that $50,000 budget was for a piece of equipment that was going to, let's say it's a vehicle that was going to make do transportation of people to and from different medical appointments, something like that. So that's a fixed cost. So if the organization that's funding this says, hey, here's $30,000, well, you literally can't buy the one thing that was probably a big part of your grant. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes these things happen where they say, hey, I like this project, but we can't do that. Here's what we can do. Here's what's been allotted to you. If that has not been thought about between your organization and the other one, that can be troublesome. So there's sort of that what if scenario that needs to be worked through on all program planning, all grant applications, but it's of particular interest when there's two organizations and there's fixed costs involved. If there's just variable costs, all the fixed costs are already within the organizations, the vehicles, the infrastructure, the staffing, there's no net new thing or things that are coming in. They're all variable costs, increase in labor hours or increase in supplies, increase in transportation costs, not necessarily a new vehicle. Those sorts of things, variable scaling up and down, then it's less of an issue. You get 30 over 50, you're going to be reducing your output numbers, reducing your outcome numbers, reducing your inputs, right? They sort of scale up and down. Okay, so joint applications, again, these are really good if you're looking at, let's say, a smaller grant. If you've never done a joint or collaborative grant ever with any other organization, it's important to start. Okay, start somewhere. So even if you're looking at a small grant opportunity, $5,000, $10,000, relatively small, again, depending on your size, that might be a lot. But let's just say it's a $10,000 grant and, it's going to be very helpful for you. But, you really strategically want to build a relationship with one other organization because there are much larger grants potentially available if you can demonstrate that collaboration has already been happening. Joint grant applications are a great way to sort of ignite that relationship. Where there's not as much on the line, the reporting's probably minimal, and it gives you just an opportunity to be sitting down in a working relationship with the individuals at another organization to get to know each other. Okay, because when you enter into some of these larger grant opportunities jointly or collaboratively, you're on the same team. You're working together. It's like you've just expanded your team. And of course, just like any team, there's personality issues. There's or personality, sort of variables. There's working tendencies. You don't know how people work, what their communication styles are. And it's not just so far as to think about it as avoiding negative sort of interactions. It's also to think about it, how to create efficiencies in your work. Coming together might make things more inefficient for both organizations. And it's better that you figure that out early than, in a larger grant where you've got more on the line and it's longer term. Okay, so joint grant opportunities and collaborative opportunities. The last thing I'll say is this is the direction of funding. Because the barriers to starting a nonprofit organization are so low, and because there is basically no accountability as to the data that is provided by nonprofit organizations can just basically say whatever they want and have some degree of logic behind it. Because of those two things, and then three, because of artificial intelligence basically leveling the game for grant writing and research, that it's going to be harder and harder and harder for funding organizations to be able to tell the difference between organizations that might actually be vastly different in their outcome numbers or their outcomes and impacts in the community. So as to say, there could be a new organization that is really good at splitting the data and telling stories, and they know how to use artificial intelligence to write grants. So their grants are solid, but they've been around for a year and a half, and their grant application looks almost as solid, hitting all the rubric points as an organization who's been around for, a half a century. Right? This is where, of course, there's opportunities for maybe somebody like you who's a younger organization, but there's also this issue, if you're a little bit more established, of how do you actually then stand out? If people are looking at your organization and comparing it to a brand new organization without the track record, how is that weighted? One way is through partnerships. So joint applications or collaborative applications, okay? And funders are going to be pushing this for the next decade, because there needs to be a working togetherness in communities for there to be an understanding at the funding level that real impact is being made. Okay, and we'll go into that more, but that's the high level. All right. And then finally, number 3 is individual grant applications. These can be for smaller projects. They can also be for, medium-sized project. It's when your organization is solely responsible for the initiative, project, or program. Individual grant applications are going to be obviously ideal. It's going to be less coordination. You can rip them out much faster. If your organization has the capacity to do a project independently, or if the project scope is just more focused, an individual grant is usually the way to go. Most organizations, if they were to apply for 20 grants in a year, more than half of them, I would say, well, more than half, are going to be solo. It's just going to be them applying for a project, program, or initiative that they're probably already doing, or that they are making some changes to, some enhancements to, based on the funding that's coming in. Okay, so that's going to be sort of your default, is an individual grant application. But really, just to tie this all together, the direction for all nonprofits is going to be collaborative. Okay, so in an individual grant application, simply getting a letter of support from organizations that are, tertiarily involved with your clients or your output or outcome, characteristics, if that's people, pets, environment, economic, whatever it is. Others that have some degree of understanding of what it means for you and your organization to have a successful program. Those are organizations that are great to have as letters of support. The process of just asking for a letter of support, asking for another organization to review your grant, review, your project and program plan, and then provide a letter of support that says, we support this. That is starting that relationship. Okay. They then will indefinitely put you on their list of organizations to reach out to for their letters of support. Okay. So I've seen a lot of relationships just start by having these letters of support, recommendation letters sort of conversations. So that's sort of a starting point. Okay, so thank you I hope you have a little bit better understanding of these three topics, collaborative, joint, and individual grant applications, and which one might be right for you. There is a free guide linked in the description with 7 additional tips on this topic to help you sort of look at the landscape of how to do this, if to do it, what to do if you do it. That's available for you. If you have any questions about what type of grant application is right for you, on a particular project, go ahead and comment below. I'd love to help out. And again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.